Okay, thank you, Dov. So, Tazria, page 608 in the Stone Chumash. Tazria means conceiving. And it talks about the laws of when a woman conceives. And we deal with that for about 8 verses, 8 psukim. And then we go to the main topic, which is tzara'at. Tzara'at is misdefined as leprosy, but it was this skin discoloring, becoming whitish, different gradations of white, and it was a physical manifestation of a spiritual malady. So it seems to be 2 very strange topics to merge. Childbirth and tzara'at. Now, let's read through a little bit, and we'll see what aspect of childbirth we are discussing, and that will give us at least a starting point of the commonality here between these 2, but we'll still need to do a little bit of work, maybe not such a little bit, to understand how the parallels run. So, Lindy, you want to start off in Hebrew or someone in Hebrew?
I don't want to start Hebrew.
Sonny, how's your Hebrew?
I can't.
I will start off in Hebrew.
Oh, okay.
Vaydaber Hashem Moshe lemor, daber al bnei Yisroel lemor, isha ki tazria v'yalda zachar, v'tama shivat yamim, ki mei nidat divota titma, u'v'yom hashmini yimol b'sar arlato. Okay, we needed you for the Hebrew. Okay, in English, please. Someone pick up. Let's take that whole. Let's from the beginning. Hashem
spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, when a woman conceives and gives birth to a male, she shall be contaminated for a 7-day period."
Okay, I hate contaminated. That's a terrible translation.
It really is.
It means ritually impure. Okay?
As during the days of her separation, infirmity shall she be
impure. Okay? Meaning in the same way that when she is a nida, when she is menstruating...
That's an infirmity?
I'm sorry?
That's an infirmity?
Well, again...
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay? So we have problems with infirmity and contamination. So that, as in the days of her menstrual separation, she shall be impure. Continue. On the 8th day.
On the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. The 33 days she shall remain in the blood of completion
of purity. You skipped one.
I'm sorry, wrong one. She may not touch anything sacred, and she may not enter the sanctuary until completion of her days of purity. If she gives birth to a female, she shall be
impure
for 2 weeks, as during her separation, and for 66 days she shall remain in the blood of purity.
Okay, so first of all, yes.
Rabbi, he says contaminated actually means ritually
impure.
Okay.
Where does it say she should remain in blood of purity? What does it mean?
Okay. So let's get a little bit of understanding of this whole purity, impurity. Okay? And what's happening here is after a boy, for the first 7 days, any bleeding is considered to be impure, and for the next, and then we interject on the 8th day. We'll have a circumcision, which seems to be out of place here. We're talking about the woman and her status of purity and impurity, right? Why are we interjecting the male, the boy's brit? What does that have to do with anything? But for the next 33 days, any bleeding is not considered to be impure, but it's considered dam tara. It's considered to be pure blood. Does not create impurity. By a girl, it's 14 days where the bleeding is impure, and then on days 15 through the next 66 days until 80, right? It is blood of purity.
Why?
Okay.
Discrimination.
Good. Okay. So all good questions. Why is there purity, impurity at all over here? Right? Why is there the discrimination? What role does the Brit Milah, right, play over here? Right? Now, at least we understand on a very basic level that this is dealing with laws of purity and impurity. What's the next topic that we discuss? The tzara'at, which is also laws of purity and impurity. But why? What is the connection? So, there is something that's called avi avot hatumah. The grandfather, right? The granddaddy of impurity. What is that? That is a mate, a corpse, a dead human body. That imparts the greatest amount of tum'ah, of impurity. Normally, one will become tameh if they come in contact, maga, they touch something that is tameh, or they carry something that's tameh, even though they're not touching it, but they are bearing the weight of it. But when it comes to a mate, the deceased, even being under the same mate, Hebrew, not M-A-T-E, not a person's mate.
That's what I was.
I'm sorry. Mate is Hebrew for a deceased person. So I'm going to use that term mate now. It's just a lot less syllables, right? And the word corpse, I don't know.
Deceased is a good word.
I'll give you an extra syllable. I won't say mate. I'll say deceased. Okay?
No,
So being under the same roof covering, right, also will impart tum'ah, impurity. Okay? And that's why a Kohen, right, won't go into a hospital if there is a mate that is there, if there is a deceased that is there. In Israel, they post signs letting in front. Kohen can enter. Kohen cannot enter. A Kohen will not go to a funeral, right? At least in the chapel, and needs to be very careful. Okay. So, tum'ah, the ritual impurity, comes about with varying degrees when we have a confrontation with mortality, a brush with death. So why is it that death causes impurity? Right, and that's why a Kohen, right, can never, right, can't even go to the funeral unless the funeral of the closest relatives. The Kohen Gadol, even they, not.
Is it because the soul is gone? It's just the body, just like
Okay. So once the soul leaves, we're left with just the body, the shell, the garment. That is very disillusioning. Our brush with death. A brush with death is very Boker Tov, good morning. All right, a brush with death is very disillusioning. In what way? It makes us feel that that's all there is. This person was alive, now we're left with this body, this dead body, and it shakes our belief. It shakes our system. we're confronted with this reality that seems to indicate we don't see a soul. We don't see a soul leaving. We don't see where the soul then goes on to. To us it seems to be Gamarnu et ha'esek, kaput, finito. It's all over. And that is something that is disillusioning. When we have a brush with death, depending upon the degree of that brush with death, that will determine the degree of impurity, of spiritual impurity that we call tum'ah. Not contamination, but spiritual impurity. So we understand to a degree, nida, when a woman menstruates, so that causes a certain degree of tum'ah. Why is that? That is a brush with death, in that there was potential life. That's what the body, the female body was preparing for fertilization, preparing for life. When that does not take place, the body rids itself of that preparation that was made for life, and that is a death of sorts. That is a brush with death. I've explained before, I'll just go through it quickly, I don't want to focus on that this week. Whenever there is a high degree of spirituality, which then is no longer, there is a vacuum that is created that is filled with impurity. If there was potential holiness, kedusha, purity, and that went unfulfilled, then that void is filled with tum'ah, with ritual impurity. A body is alive with the potential to connect to God, to connect to the spiritual, to connect to the eternal. Once the soul leaves, that body is no longer able to do that. And therefore there is this tum'ah. There is this impurity. A woman menstruates. There was this potential of giving birth, of creating life, of partnering with God in creation. And it didn't happen. So there was that potential holiness, purity, which is no longer there. So that void is filled with tum'ah, with impurity. Childbirth, and this will explain also the question you asked, Leah, but I want to come back and offer a different approach also. If we have the potential to be godly, so certainly if we were to choose a term that is unique to God, a term that we could choose would be creator. The time that a human being comes as close to being a creator is a woman at childbirth. A man has his ritual impurity after he contributes his seed to the process. That's where he has his ritual impurity after that, because he was at the point that he was as close to being a creator as he could be. His contribution towards that creative process. And once the person is no longer at that level of being as godly as they can in terms of being a creator, then what results afterwards? Tum'ah, impurity. Because that level is no longer actively engaged, a void is created, tum'ah, impurity. A man, after his sexual encounter, becomes tameh. Because he was part of it, he was creator-like, he is no longer. The woman, at childbirth, that is as close to being a creator as a human being ever can. That's over. She's now no longer Superwoman, Wonder Woman. She's just a very, very tired woman at this point. A very proud, happy mother. But we'll see there are other components also mixed in over there. So at that point, she's no longer Superwoman. Right? So that Kedusha, that creatorhood is no longer in play. What results is tum'ah, is impurity. You ask, why is it double? So an answer that's given is because she created a creator. And therefore, the holiness was that much greater. She created a potential creator. Therefore, that which results is greater. Is a greater degree of tum'ah. Yes, Rachel.
A woman cannot go to the shul for... What about men?
Wait, a woman can't go to the shul, what?
For a certain number of days after the birth. No?
She can't go to Ralph's also for a certain amount of days after birth. I mean, that's...
A woman has a period of tum'ah, of impurity.
She's allowed to come to shul.
She's okay, come to the shul.
Yes. A woman's having a period, definitely come to shul.
So what is the restriction?
She's not allowed... Wait. When a wife is having her period until the time that she goes to the mikvah, there the husband and the wife separate.
Okay, what are the limitations on a woman after she gives birth? She has a period of
When you
tum'ah
say
for a
the
certain
period
of time.
of impurity,
None.
No limitations.
None. Look, if we had the Beit HaMikdash, she wouldn't go into the temple.
Exactly.
Okay, but she can come to the shul?
Yes.
Okay. A woman has to wait after her period for a certain period of time. She goes to mikvah and then she becomes pure. What about a man? Does he have to do anything to purify himself?
So a man, once again, right? So let's put it into the context that we just discussed, right? A man, after he is called motzi zera, after he produces his seed, he becomes tameh.
For how long? And and what does he have to do to purify himself?
He would go to the mikvah to purify himself,
So he
right?
has to go to
In the
the
time of the temple, he would need to go to the mikvah to purify himself. There's a lesser degree of tum'ah than by a woman having her period. Why is that? Because he has a lesser degree of potential life than the woman having, right? The menstruating woman, right, has had a full potential of creating life inside of her. So there was a greater degree of potential holiness. There's a greater degree of tum'ah, of the impurity that results. Okay? But let's look at it. So that's one way of looking at it. But we started with another approach on it somewhat. And that is tum'ah is not necessarily the absence of the potential holiness purity, but it's a brush with mortality. Okay. Amen. How is childbirth a brush with mortality?
It's a dangerous process.
Okay. Right? On one level, right, it is a dangerous process. Right? nowadays, with all of our care and medical intervention, a lot less so. But, going back 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, 400 years, 500 years, the infant mortality rate was very high. So certainly on a certain level, it's a brush with mortality, because it is a time of somewhat danger for the mother and for the baby.
And it's a messy business, by the way.
I'm sorry?
It's a messy business, childbirth.
Messy.
There is an after. What's the
Okay, the placenta. Yeah, I mean, it's a process of the body. Yeah, okay. There's also another aspect of loss related with childbirth. Right? The whole postpartum depression. Right? I mean, I don't know. But you all know better than I. But it seems that there's a certain sense of loss.
hormonal changes? That's all.
Yeah, yes, but certainly the hormones will exacerbate the feelings that a person is feeling. But when a woman miscarries, there's a profound sense of loss, right? Even when a person gives birth, of course, the product is there, and you're holding an incredible creation, a miracle in your arms, and it becomes almost unfathomable that this person was inside, just a few moments, hours, days, weeks ago. I mean, it's always just overwhelming. But there is also a certain sense of loss that I was,
We were one.
I was one,
And then it's like
and there's a separation, right? So there is a certain sense of loss. It's not a death loss, right? It's almost at the opposite end of a death loss, but it is a certain separation. So I heard a very interesting, there's a Rabbi Ami Silver who pointed out a very interesting parallel. Right? So we asked also, right, verse 3 seemed a little bit strange. Right? Verse 1, 2 is speaking all about the purity, impurity. And verse 4 through and on, all about the purity and the impurity. Verse 3, Uvayom Hashmini, on the 8th day, Yimol Basar Arlato. Circumcision. What does that have to do with anything? Right? Elsewhere, the Torah discusses the mitzvah of circumcision. Right? It began with Avraham. Right? Elsewhere, the Torah discusses the mitzvah of circumcision. What's that doing over here?
It's the end of the 7-day period.
Okay. Right? So somehow it seems to mark the end of the 7-day impure period and usher in day 8 through 40, which is the day of purity, the days of purity, even if there is bleeding. So there's an interesting, a very beautiful approach that there's a website, alephbeta.org, where David Foreman. And I strongly recommend it. It's fantastic stuff. But what's particularly exciting about it for me is their use of, I think they call it intertextuality. Meaning, look at the text and see parallels where elsewhere we find the same it's something that the Balaturim, many commentators do that, but they just keep going that route and finding fascinating things. An example, I think Rabbi Sachs says this, I don't think it's from Aleph Beta, but there's very, very rare is it when the Torah expresses the emotions of something, right? Yet when Esav didn't get the blessing because Yaakov got the blessing that Esav thought was that he was deserving of, it says Vayizak, Za'aka, Gedolah, Umara, Ad Ma'od. And he cried out. Vayizak, Za'aka, a cry, Gedolah, great, Umara, bitter, Ad Ma'od, very, very. Right? And it's rare that we find that. Yet
Why did he cry? I didn't understand.
Esav,
Yes.
when he realized that the blessing had been given to Jacob, he cried out a great and bitter cry. Only one other place in Tanakh do we find, and he cried out a very bitter cry. Where's that? We just heard it. Megillat Esther. Right? Mordechai. Right? Mordechai let out a bitter cry when he heard the decree that had been placed. Right? Fascinating. Right? Here is a descendant of Esav, right? Esav's grandson was Amalek and Haman, right? And now he's, right? So you draw these parallels between the text in different places. So take a look over here in Bereshit, page 16. This is after Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve had eaten from the Eitz Hadat. And towards the bottom there, verse 16. Let's hear that in Hebrew. El Ha'isha Amar. Okay, in English, please. To the woman he said, I will greatly increase your suffering and your childbearing. In pain shall you bear children. Yet your craving shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Okay? Without going into what that means. But let's deal with the first part. Harbe, harba itzvonech. I will greatly increase your difficulties, your sadness. V'heironech, ve'etzev tel bibanim. Now let's look at another place where we have arbe, I will increase. Let's go to page 74. Make that 72. Vayihi Avram, chapter 17. In Hebrew, please. Vayihi Avram. Leah.
ויהי אברהם בן 90 שנה ו9 שנים, וירא אדוני לאברהם ויאמר אליו, אני אל שדי, התהלך לפניי ואהיה תמים.
One more.
ואתנה בריתי ביני ובינך, וארבה אותך במאוד מאוד.
Interesting. Ve'arbe otcha. In English, right? Avram was 99 years old. Hashem appeared to Avram and said to him, I am Kel Shaddai, walk for me, be perfect. I will set my covenant between me and you, and I will increase you most exceedingly. Arbe, I will increase you. Right? So we have this parallel of the difficulty of childbearing, but as a result of the brit, what will there be? There'll be the increase of the nation. Right? There'll be that increase. Okay? So what do we find over here, back to where we were now? On the 8th day, and we understand, where does the brit take place? On the male organ that which will be arbe et zaracha. I will increase your seed. Right? It was this commandment which led to the bracha, I will increase your seed, and therefore this covenant, this circumcision takes place on the organ, the male organ of increasing the seed. So let's come back now to Tazria for a moment. And maybe we could see what happens on that 8th day. On the 8th day, the circumcision takes place. Pasuk Gimel. That creates a transition from the arbe ditzvonech, from the travail, the sadness, the sense of loss of childbirth. That then helps to redirect that to a sense of mission, to a sense of accomplishment, to the sense of the role that I am playing in this blessing, in this building of the nation, this building of the world. So that effects a transition of sorts. And we go from 7 days of impurity to the 33 days of purity. Very interesting view on it. Why by a woman? By giving birth to a girl. Why is it then 14 days?
Because she has the potential to...
She created the creating, just said it.
So that was one way of looking at it before. But working with this understanding, so there's a transition that takes place with the boy on day 8. Is there a transition of sorts that takes place with a girl?
No.
There's not a marked transition, right? But 7 days is the menstrual cycle. Now, obviously, this newborn baby girl is not menstruating, but the same way that the Brit brings into focus this to mitigate the sense of loss and separation, this brush with mortality, and allows one to focus on the building, on the positive. So the 7 days for a girl, for a female that's born, brings to mind that reproductive cycle that this infant will develop upon reaching maturity, and the role that she will play in this building, as opposed in this arbe et zarech, as opposed to harbe et itzvonech. An interesting approach I wanted to share.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I just wanted to add that, just kind of like as just a side thing, that Rabbi Samir Cohen points out that in the human body, blood does not coagulate until the 8th day. So when the circumcision happens,
Right. I don't know if it doesn't coagulate at all, but I think they say the highest level of vitamin K, which leads to the coagulation, right, is highest on the 8th day. Yeah.
But it says here she can't enter the sanctuary. So I thought, this is a sanctuary, isn't it? Or it's not? Or it's only temple?
This is a microcosm of the sanctuary.
So
The sanctuary over here means the Mishkan, the tabernacle, or eventually the Beit HaMikdash. Okay? But our sanctuary, which is a microcosm of the real sanctuary, right? A woman is allowed to enter. Yeah. The next thing that we go into is tzara'at, right? Which we said before is a physical manifestation of a spiritual malady. What is, our sages have identified, what are the causes of this tzara'at, which I don't want to call leprosy because it's not modern day leprosy, but it is this whitening of the skin. Okay, so two of the main things that are identified are lashon hara, speaking badly of others, and haughtiness. Haughtiness.
What?
Haughtiness. Gava. Acting in a way, I am greater than thou. Right? Greater than thou. Attitudes. Now, it's interesting. How is this a brush with mortality?
Lashon hara we know, because a bad word can kill a person.
Okay.
Not physically, but reputation. Huh? Three people? Yeah. But haughtiness, everything.
Okay. So let's take a look. We find a number of instances look on page 794 for a moment.
Page?
794. Make that 796. This is when Miriam had spoken badly about Moshe. And she was struck with, if you look at verse 9. Verse 10. The cloud departed from top of the tent, and behold, Miriam was afflicted with tzara'at, like snow. Aaron turned to Miriam, and behold, she was afflicted with tzara'at. And Aaron said to Moses, I beg you, my Lord, do not cast a sin upon us, for we have been foolish, we have sinned. Let her not be like a mate, like a corpse, like one who leaves his mother's womb with half the flesh having been consumed. Wow. So we see that tzara'at is compared to a mate, to a deceased, to a corpse. And it's interesting. The body's turning white with tzara'at. When does the body turn white? Upon death. Right? Person has no, the complexion has no color. Right? You look like you're dead. Right? They have this ghastly, this ghostly complexion. Right? So, tzara'at is almost like an encounter with death. Let's go back to Bereshit for just a moment. And you have to bear with me with the Hebrew over here. Page 8. Oh, 1 second, maybe it's a little later. 1 second. Sorry, make that page 10. Perek Bet, Pasuk Chet.
Which is?
It's verse 7. Chapter 2, verse 7 on page 10. Vayitzer Hashem Elokim et ha'adam afar min ha'adama. God formed mankind, afar min ha'adama, from the earth, right? From the ground. Vayipach ba'afav, he blew into his nostrils, nishmat chayim, right? The soul of life. That's why Vayitzer, if you look at it in Hebrew, all of a sudden it has two yuds, because there were two formings. There's the physical and the spiritual being. Vayhi Adam lenefesh chaya. And man became a nefesh chaya, a living being. Now, in the Hebrew side, go over, straight over to the left there, we have the Aramaic translation. And 3 lines from the bottom there, the third word, V'havat ba'adam, and there was in this man, l'ruach mimalalah. Man became a speaking spirit. So something that makes us uniquely alive is our speech. So we can get a sense a little bit that the tzara'at, the leprosy, which is this death-like, as Aaron called it in regard to Miriam, and this clear death-like appearance, comes about as a result of the misappropriation of this gift, of this power that we have of speech. That's what brings us down into this mate-like, this death-like state. The person's alive, but, well, let's look over here for a moment. On back to page 609, 611. If a person will have, chapter 13, verse 2, Adam ki yeh ba'or b'saro, se'et, o sapachat, o vaheret. V'ayah ba'or b'saro l'neged tzara'at. If a person will have on their skin, there are 3 different types of this whitish deformation. It's called se'et, sapachat, and baheret. And these are different levels of the whiteness. I think the Chasam Sofer, one of the great rabbis, says, look at these words. Se'et. So it's a certain gradation of this white skin malady. Fair enough. But what does se'et actually mean also in Hebrew? Yeah, like lifting up. Se'et. Right? What causes us to speak? Right? Su'u sha'arum rashaychem. Right? Lift up. What causes us to speak badly of others? I'm above you.
Or I want to be above you.
Or I want to, well, good.
Yeah.
Right? There are 2 ways to make oneself uplifted, higher than everyone else. One way, the difficult way, is to lift myself up. What's the easier way to make myself higher than everyone else? To knock them all down. Right? But so, se'et, now an easy way to knock others down. Did you hear what this person did? You think this person is so high? Do you know what they did? Right? All it takes is a few words. All it takes is a few words. And it really is incredible how in one's mind, our view of another person gets knocked down, and it is so hard to reinstate that in our own minds. It is so hard to view that person in the same way after you've heard that poisoning from someone else. Se'et is one thing. Sapachat. Sapachat is something that is added on. Right? Why do I speak badly of others? What do I want to do? I want to add on to myself, but once again, adding on to myself by knocking someone else out. Baheret. What is Bahir? Yom Bahir, bright, clear. Right? Baheret is, I've got this clarity. I've got this brightness. But I find the fault in everyone else. That's what I focus on. I've got the brightness and the clarity, but everyone else is kind of darkened, is kind of sullied. So what happens? This person gets this tzara'at. What is then done with this person? They're sent out from the machaneh.
Out of the camp.
Out of the camp. They are sent out of the camp. Why are they sent out of the camp?
Because they're considered dead.
Okay. In a degree they're considered dead. Right? On a simpler level, if you don't know how to properly